Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Leverage Your Podcast show. And I have with me an Instagram expert, Jen Herman, and I've been looking for an Instagram expert to come on the show for a long time. And you just popped into my world, Jen, at the exact right time. And I have so many questions for you. So I'm so excited to dive in.
Awesome. I'm excited to dive in too. This is fun.
Awesome. So the first thing I want to ask is, because I feel like this is a myth, that Instagram is only for influencers or it's only for a specific target market. Is it right for everyone or not everyone?
Yeah. So I always say anyone can market on Instagram. Anyone can be on Instagram. There was a mortician I used to follow on Instagram, like a medical examiner, like people that you would never think could be
Yeah.
successful on Instagram. The TSA is one of the most successful Instagram accounts out there. The people that make you take your shoes off at the airport are massively successful on Instagram. So yes, they're one of my favorite accounts. I always talk about them. So I'm like, if these accounts can do it, anyone can do it. Now, that doesn't mean everyone should use Instagram. It may not be right for you and your brand, your podcast. That's okay. But in general, yes, there are a lot of assumptions that like, well, I don't have a product. I'm not,
Mhm.
selling to consumer, and I'm not an influencer showing off fashion or whatever it is. You absolutely do not need to fall into these specific areas. You get to use Instagram however works for you. And with over 2 billion monthly active users on Instagram, your audience is there. So
Yeah.
they want to see you, they want to hear from you. And it's about creating the content that resonates with that audience, not everybody.
Yeah. That's good to know. Absolutely. But here's the thing is what I think. So many people are overwhelmed and confused by Instagram.
Yeah.
There are a lot of moving parts and a lot of elements on Instagram. So, can you kind of give an overview of what's possible in Instagram and what all those moving pieces or features, whatever you want to call them, are?
So back in the day when Instagram started, it was a photo platform, right? Like that was it. You uploaded a photo, you put a filter on it, you put a caption, some hashtags, and boom, your strategy was, quote, done. But then came videos, and then came stories. And now videos are reels, and we have carousels, and we have notes, and we have DMs, and we have all these things. And it seems like a lot, but some of these things work in silo. Some of them are, like stories are really very different than like a feed or a reel. Feed, carousels, and reels start to like merge into one. So if you have one strategy, although reels can be a little bit different, they're showing up in the feed. They're showing up in places where people are looking for it in that capacity. And then, you obviously have like that direct messages and other things. There's a lot, but that doesn't mean you A, have to do everything, and B, you can find out what works for your audience and focus on what's more valuable. So for some people, reels are incredibly valuable. And for everyone, you should be creating reels, but the capacity and the frequency is up to you. But, like I'm not good with stories because my audience doesn't like stories. I can
Mm.
reach 1,500 people without trying on a feed post, and I'll reach 150 people on a story. And I'm like, well, why am I
Ah,
putting time into this? Right. So, like, I've learned not to invest time into stories because it doesn't work for my audience and my brand. And this is where it takes a little bit of practice, a little testing, but you get to figure out what works for you, your content preference, and what works for your audience. And then you just put the effort where you're going to get the best results. You're not going to go all in on one thing or another, but you can tamper down
mhm.
certain things to put the time and effort where it's going to give you the best bang for your buck.
That's great to know. Because, yeah, sometimes you feel like, oh my God, I'm like wrecking my reach or I can't do it all. And I never thought about looking at the stats. It's like, okay, what reach
Yeah.
am I getting from stories versus reels versus feed or whatever that may be, and lean into what's giving you a bigger ROI.
Exactly. And then there's like one of the biggest myths out there is that you have to post on Instagram every single day. You
Mm.
do not need to post on Instagram every single day. I tell people all the time, if you can post 3 times a week, great. Post 3 times a week. If you can post once a week, post once a week. I would rather have you post really good valuable quality content that's going to perform well than have you post a whole bunch of mediocre content that doesn't get the reach, that doesn't get the engagement, because that does actually end up hurting you algorithmically in the long run. So it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And if that means doing one post a week and that's all you can manage, do that consistently and do it well. And that is your success strategy.
I think too, that will make a lot of business owners like their shoulders drop a little bit.
Right?
My goodness.
Yes, I give you permission. Jen Herman came
Yay.
on and told you it's okay. You don't need to, you shouldn't post every single day. Like I've increased my frequency because I'm in a test phase right now. But even then I'm posting like 5 to 6 days a week. I'm not even posting 7 days a week.
That's good to know. Yeah, that's super helpful. Now, what is more important? The pictures, carousels, in the like the posts or the reels? And my second question with that is, I know you can sometimes make the reels show in your posts. Is there a better approach?
Again, it's going to come down to testing. Instagram is heavy on the reels right now. Instagram wants you creating reels. So they tend to reward reels a little bit more, but they reward good reels, not bad reels. So if you're creating a reel just for the sake of saying, well, everyone tells me I have to make a reel. And if it's a bad reel, if it's not valuable, if you aren't getting people's attention at the beginning of the reel and they're not watching it, then it's actually hurting you, in which case photos might be better. So you can't really say one is exclusively better than the other. But you never, like I said, you never want to exclude one. A lot of people are like, well, I have a podcast. Everything I have is video and audio. Why would I do a still photo? That's a waste of time. I'm going to do all reels all the time. The problem is not everyone is a reels consumer. I do not prefer reels. I will go into the reels tab. I will watch reels on occasion. But if you look at my split of time, I spend way more time in feed and stories than I spend in reels. I don't like creating reels. I don't like watching reels, but I do. I've created lots of them and I do consume them. But if all you're doing is creating reels, you're alienating the audience who doesn't like reels. You're alienating the audience who doesn't want to watch a video when they're standing in the grocery line or wherever it is where they happen to be scrolling on their phone. So you can't go exclusively one way or the other. Now, again, I have built an audience around readers. I started as a blogger. I started with written content. So for me, transitioning to reels was harder on my audience because they're used to reading my very long captions on Instagram as a microblog. And so I do both, but I've learned what works for me and my brand. You have to take the time and figure out what works for you. If your reels are getting twice the reach of your feed posts, then reels are definitely going to be your primary content. But again, you don't want to exclude the people who are the readers or who want to scroll through a carousel or who want a static photo to get the attention because they're not in the reels tab.
Yeah, that's great feedback. Thank you for that. Now with the reels and with clients and myself, like some take off and have a ton of views and some are meh. And I'm like, you try to rack your brain as to why. Why, Jen? Why?
There are so many factors, and most of them we can't replicate. A lot of it is, for the sake of argument, it's luck, it's timing. You happen to post that reel at just the right time that one person saw it and they shared it to their story and that got exponential reach and then that shared it to a bunch more people. That's a possibility. It could be that at that specific period of time, nobody else in your industry was posting about the content that you were posting about, so yours got preferential placement. It could be that, it was the title you used on it, like the caption. It could be that, it was the way you started the video. It could be that for some fluke, Instagram was like, I'm going to put you in Explore for all the people. And we don't know why. There's so many reasons how our content gets distributed that we don't have control over. And it's frustrating because we're like, well, that one did great. Why? How can I do more of that? So you really do want to start. I'm the queen of data and analytics. I love to review the stats and the performance. So typically what I tell people is find your baseline. If your average baseline is 3,000 views on a reel and this one got 6,000, let's start picking that one apart as to why. Was it the time of day? Was it the day of the week? Was it the content? Was it how you started the video? Was it the color of the text box? Like start analyzing what you did. And then if you get a reel that does like 1,000, let's pick that one apart. Why did that one not get your average reach? Again, was it the time, the day, the content, the what the first photo of the video was, or those sorts of things, and start comparing, because we want, the more we have data, the more we can try to replicate the good ones. But sometimes it's just straight up luck that we have no explanation for, and Instagram doesn't give us a lot of insights. They don't tell us a lot of information. So we're kind of just going off of, guesswork half the time, which is so frustrating. But if you're watching those stats, if you're watching your shares and your saves, if you're looking at your video length, if you have a really short video with a long caption, you're going to have way more views because people are reading the caption and that video is looping. If that was a 5-second video and it takes 15 caption, you got 3 views per read. So you've just tripled your viewership on it. If you have a 1-minute video, and a short caption, do people watch the full minute or do they watch 12 seconds and then go on to the next? So less views, you don't have the retention. Like all of these things play into your view strategy and your, why something might do better than others. I will also point out, in general, length of video is a key factor when you're creating your reels. Instagram does not typically promote anything over 30 seconds to explore or recommended. So if your reels are 58 seconds, 72 seconds, it's going to go to your existing audience. They may share it, but Instagram is not typically going to put a video over 30 seconds into explore or into recommended posts. So if you're trying to get in front of new people, we want really short videos.
That's great to know.
Yeah, it's something most people don't think about. And
Yeah.
I have a great video that just went out like last week. And I want to say it's going gangbusters, but it's doing really well with my existing audience. Great engagement. But it's 1 minute and 19 seconds because it's me talking and I'm obviously 30. And so it's a longer video. And Instagram has only shown it to, like, of all the views, it's like 9% non-followers. And I'm like, Instagram, like, this is clearly a high quality video, but they won't put it out to non-followers.
But it's so frustrating, right? Because in podcasts and when we're having conversations, you want to give a meaty enough little sound bite so that someone has a good takeaway. Yes. But getting a good takeaway, less than 30 seconds, you're like, ooh.
Hard. And this is where, so if you are trying to promote a podcast, those longer ones, you can do up to 90 seconds in a reel. You can do longer ones. If you upload it, it's still a reel, but you have to upload it differently. But you can do longer ones. But if you're doing those 30 to 90 second reels, just know that's serving your existing audience. Right. That is serving the people who already follow your brand, who already know about your podcast. We want to give them the meaty. We want them to say, yes, this is an expert I want to know more about. You're serving your existing audience. They still work. They are valuable and they convert. But if you want to reach non-followers, people who don't know your brand, people who don't know your podcast, you're going to want to do super short sound bites. It may not even be your guest. It could literally be a photo of me with, like, here's what you get in this podcast. And it's literally just text boxes across the screen and it's an 18-second video. Yeah. Right. So you're capitalizing on your guest, but it's a screenshot or a photo with just a couple little, text boxes that pop up rather than the guest actually speaking. And that's what's going to get in front of the new audiences. Yeah.
That's gold. Thank you. This is why I have you on the show.
Happy to help.
Now, you talked about conversion. So I want to touch upon that for a minute, because as we know, you can't really put links in Instagram, and there is the link bio and all that stuff. And now there are also tools that do like an instant DM with like keywords and what have you. Yeah. What do you recommend are the best strategies to be able to convert those viewers, listeners, readers to do the thing?
So, I mean, it comes down to multiple factors, including your budget, right? I mean, we were talking about this in the green room before we started, where running a podcast can be expensive, and adding another tool, adding another paid subscription to send automatic DMs, is it valuable for you? Maybe. I can't tell you if the ROI is there for you or not. So that might be a tool you could use. Meta is working on more and more of these AI and direct message related tools that mean they're free, they're in-house, you don't have to rely on external tools. So there are things that will move in that direction over time. So maybe don't invest in an external tool and wait for that, but I don't know when that's coming. But those are great resources, right? So you have a podcast clip, or you have some sort of promo for the podcast, you have a caption, it says to listen, comment, episode below, comment link below, comment 68 below, whatever it is. And when you do, it triggers a keyword, which triggers an automatic DM. These are great. They're also high maintenance, right? Because you have to have a trigger for every single episode, right? So it's like every time you have a new episode, you have to go build the new keyword, build the new trigger, build the new link. It is time consuming. So if you've got a team to help you do this, these can be incredibly valuable, but they are a high kind of like barrier of entry for if you're starting a podcast. If you do Instagram stories, Instagram stories are the highest converting content across Instagram. Again, I'm the exception to every rule. They don't work for me. But in general, Instagram stories are the highest converting content because anybody can put a link sticker on any story. So teach your audience, get them to go to your stories. You can post that same story every single day. 3 times a week. You don't have to post the story once, it expires in 24 hours. You're like, oh, only 3 people clicked on the link. No, post it again. Post it again. Because not everyone checks stories every single day. So if you posted on Monday and they came in Thursday, they never saw your story. So rely on those stories. Do little video clips, do little, animations, do something that gets people's attention. It could be a clip from the podcast. Again, it could be a list of bullet points of what that guest talked about. Link, and they're going to go right to that podcast episode. That's the quickest, easiest way to get people there. But again, not everybody watches stories. So of course you want to rely on your link in bio. That's going to be your workhorse. And if you are exclusively promoting your podcast on your Instagram account, then you want your link in bio to be your list of shows. You're not going to go to each individual show. You're just going to go to your list of all the episodes you have, and they can go find the relevant episode that they're looking for. Chances are, if they're seeing your post from yesterday, they're going to see the most recent podcast episode at the top. They're not going to have to look too far. But if they do go down and they're, they can find other episodes or whatever. So link in bio is going to be your workhorse. But if you're promoting exclusively the podcast, make it your podcast page. If you're not, if your podcast is part of your brand, meaning you also do coaching, or you also do, maybe you create a product and you have a podcast as well, or maybe, you're a photographer, but you've got a podcast about photography, whatever it is, you have other services, you want to create a dedicated landing page for your link in bio. So this is something where you want to go to your website designer, that may be you, and you're going to create a landing page that is mobile optimized, that has the things you typically refer on Instagram. So you can if you want to go to mine, you go to JENNS_trends, Jens_trends on Instagram. You'll see my link in bio, and it's got, 6 or 7 options. So you would have here's my coaching services, listen to recent podcast episodes, about me, contact me, whatever those kind of key things are that you would typically promote on Instagram, you're going to put those on that dedicated landing page. You do not, under any circumstance, want to send people to your homepage. That's overwhelming. It is confusing. They don't know where to go when they get there, and they don't want to navigate. You've already made them take the steps to get to the we want it as easy as possible for them to get to that podcast episode now that they know they want to listen to that episode.
Yeah. Perfect. Yeah. And it's testing, right? Like I've tested with the client with the DM strategy and it didn't work so much. And then people do, and I check the stats, people do click on the link in the bio. So people are conditioned to be able to do that. But once you
And you have
push,
to think about
yeah.
the audience too. Like if you have a podcast about getting divorced, link or like commenting to send the DM link, probably not a good strategy. Because no one's going to want to publicly post on a public profile about divorce that they want the podcast episode about getting divorced.
That's
Like,
hilarious. You're so true.
but
Yeah.
these are things, right? Like I've worked with a lot of lawyers and you know, professionals, and I'm like, if you're going into debt consolidation, do you want to publicly post that you want to, you know, learn about
No.
debt consolidation? No, you're never going to post that publicly. So those are where that, you know, comment to get a DM strategies are probably not helpful. You want to rely on stories. You want to rely on that link in bio where people can secretly, without the whole world knowing that they're doing it, go click on those things. So keep in mind who your audience is and what their behavior would be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a true point. I never even thought of it that way. That's hilarious. And of course, I can't have you on the show without asking about hashtags, because the conversation and the controversy around hashtags is completely real. And
Yes.
I have seen people still have like a crap ton of hashtags. I also see people that have aborted hashtags altogether. And so it's like, Jen, what say you about hashtags?
So here's the thing. Hashtags have changed a lot over the last 3 to 4 years. What happened 4 years ago was Instagram introduced keyword search. So prior to the pandemic, you could only search for the account name, a location, or a hashtag. So if you wanted to find a podcast about being a foodie, or if you wanted to find a podcast about beauty, if you wanted to find a podcast about whatever it was, you had to go search for hashtag food podcast. And if you didn't look for that food podcast, or if your hashtags didn't have hashtag food podcast, you didn't show up in that search. It was hypercritical that you had all the right hashtags. 4 years ago, Instagram introduced keyword search, which has changed search parameters, because now I can just go type in food podcast as keywords, and Instagram's going to troll all the content across the platform and look for accounts that regularly post podcast food related and a post that is individually about food on a podcast, and that's what they're going to put into the search results. This has conditioned a lot of people to think, oh, I don't need hashtags because I'm relying on keyword search. But there's 3 key criteria that Instagram looks at for ranking keyword search. One of those is hashtags. One of the key things they look at to determine what your content is about is your hashtags.
Makes sense.
So you still absolutely want to use them. It's still more is better in my general advice. You still want to use 20 to 30 hashtags per post. Yes. But we're going to be more intentional. So instead of doing like hashtag food podcast, hashtag foodie podcast, hashtag podcast for foodies, you're just going to do food podcast. And then you're going to do something else about maybe, you know, Italian food. You're going to do something about, you know, chef inspiration. Like you're going to find other hashtags that aren't tied, you know, to 4 variations of the same topic. And so we're going to play with those and figure out what works for your brand, your industry, your specific branding, the guest on your podcast, whatever those sorts of things are, and mix in those hashtags into your post caption. Instagram will only look at hashtags for keywords if the hashtags are in the caption. Back in the day, you could put them in a comment, and they still work. They still work in a comment for hashtag search, but in a comment, they don't rank for keyword search. So it's really important that you're still using those hashtags, put them in the caption. And if you're not using descriptive captions, hashtags are 10 times more important. Because if you have a good long descriptive caption and you've got enough keywords in there, Instagram, you know, is like, okay, we know what the post is about because you wrote us a good long caption. The hashtags become almost redundant. You could lessen the quantity you need. But if your caption is tune into this week's episode with guest Jen Herman,
it doesn't.
Instagram knows nothing. No. They don't know the topic. They don't know what it's about. They don't have any keywords. So that's when you want to get all the hashtags in there for the topic and the related content so that Instagram can put it into the right keyword searches.
Perfect. And I didn't realize about the keyword search versus the hashtag. So that's great to know.
Yeah.
And it's good that it's savvy enough to understand the content and read the captions, the words that are in it, so that kind of like Google, it understands the content that you have. And it makes it
Yes.
easier for people to find what it is that they're looking for.
Exactly. And Instagram, when they're looking for content, like I work a lot with real estate agents and stuff as well. And, when you're putting up content, so I always say, I'm like, let's say, again, let's use the example, you're a food podcaster. If you're always doing podcasts about food, it's probably in your bio, which is one of the categories that Instagram looks at. A lot of your content is probably about food and podcasts. So Instagram's more likely to rank your content in that search result when someone is looking for a food related podcast because they know you always talk about this.
Right.
But if your content is typically, mom blogging and you're always talking about, things to do with your kids and, all the activities locally around you, but then you do a podcast episode about food, doesn't mean your podcast about food isn't going to rank in search, but it's not going to be the number one. It's going to be down the page because you don't always talk about food podcasts. So you want to think about that as well when you're creating your content strategy. If you want to be found for a specific niche, that's easier to do because all your content is about that. But don't expect one podcast off of your mainstream to all of a sudden, be the blockbuster that gets a ton of exposure, because it's not what you typically talk about. And it's not going to rank as well on Instagram.
Yeah, that makes total sense. That's why I always tell my clients who guest on podcasts, yes, keep sharing, even though you talked about the same topic.
Yes, exactly.
So smart. Now, going back to stories for a minute here, there's also, of course, the highlights, which most people don't take advantage of.
Yes.
And it's kind of weird and tricky on how to even use it. So yeah, if you can cover highlights, and is it even worth putting the time into?
I'm less and less a fan of highlights just because as the platform has evolved, I don't think they're as relevant, but for some people they're incredibly valuable. So highlights are when you go to someone's profile on Instagram, you see their profile, you see all their contact buttons, and you see a bunch of bubbles, and then you see their grid. Those circular bubbles are story highlights. And those are specific highlights that content creator, that brand, has said, I want to save that for someone to view later. So it's archived stories. So stories are no longer visible on your stories, but you have them in your highlights so people can go back and watch them. From a podcasting perspective, you would want to think about things like, an about, who are you? Whether you're a podcast guest, what are you about? If you're a podcast host, what is the show about? What are you typically going to get? So you're going to have maybe a handful of stories in there that talk about what you do, why you do it, who your target audience is, something like that. You would have another highlight that's going to maybe be, top guests. And so you're going to have short little clips, not too many. This is where it can get hard. Like if you have more than 10 in a story or in a highlight, people aren't watching them. No one is tapping through that many. If they see 100 dots across the top of the screen, there is no way they're getting to all of them. So we want to keep this fresh. If you had like a celebrity level guest in your industry 2 years ago, by all means, leave that one in there, but keep it fresh and don't just put every single guest in there because most people don't care. You're going to want to be really selective to the 5, 6, 10 at most that you really want to kind of highlight that shows maybe the diversity of your guests or the diversity of topics that you cover, or the very niched experience that you cover, whatever that is, that would be in there. And then you could do another one that maybe is, fun behind the scenes. Like you could have fun little bloopers or behind the scenes of like what your setup is like or what it's like when you interview people. And so you could do, a handful of posts in there as well. So we're talking like 3 to 4 highlights, usually at most. Anything more than that, again, starts getting a little bit too busy. People aren't typically going to watch them. And if you are going to commit to doing highlights, which for some people, like I said, are very valuable, keep them fresh. No one wants to go in and see a post from 96 weeks ago and be like, did you do anything in the last 2 years, 3 years? Like it, like
Right.
they want to see current content. And so if all your stuff in your highlight is from more than a year ago, it is time to delete and move on.
Mm, yeah.
Or recreate. Like I always tell people, they're like, but Jen, like that's my about me content. It's still relevant. And I'm like,
Mm,
that's great. But when I log in and see something from, 122 weeks ago, I don't think it's relevant
right.
because you have more gray hair. Like, what do you look like? What do you sound like? Are you still covering the same topics? You may be, but I don't know that as a newcomer. So every 6 months, do another about me post,
Yeah.
put it up in your stories, move it to the highlight, get rid of the old one. And that way you've always got fresh content that people can relate to. And they know that you're constantly creating valuable, fresh, current, timely, relevant content.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great tip. And of course, I can't talk about Instagram without talking about the profile because there are so many thoughts about what you should and shouldn't do. And of course, there's barely any real estate anyways,
Yes.
but I like how you do yours.
Thank you.
Yeah, so any tips on how to have a great
Yes.
profile?
So, two things up front, your name and your username should not be the same. Your
Oh,
username is how you are known on the platform, right? So when I comment on someone's post, I'm at Jen's
yeah.
underscore trends. I'm not Jen Herman. I'm Jen's underscore trends. You are your username. So that should be whether it's your brand name, your podcast name, whatever it is. Your name should not be the same thing because these are all relevant to that keyword search again. So we want the name to now be maybe the podcast name is the username, the brand name, and then podcast or something like that. Use an emoji even, but we want a relevant keyword. If you are a podcast for dog walkers, we want to have dog walking podcast as your name. If that's not your username, right? We want them to be different. They should not be the exact same thing.
Okay.
Then in your bio description, you have 150 characters. That's it. That's
Yeah.
only a little more than an old tweet. So it's not a lot of content to be able to put something up there. But what I always tell people is I'm like, you want this to read for first time visitors. Once somebody is following you on Instagram, they know who you are. They've listened to your podcast. They care about you. They don't care what's in your bio. It doesn't matter to them anymore. So you're writing this for first time visitors, potentially first time listeners. What do they need to know about you, your podcast, your business, your brand, whatever it is? That bio should tell people who you are, what you do, and what's in it for them. It is not about you, right? This is your elevator pitch. This is your 30 seconds to tell people why they should care about you, but it has to be about them. So it could be dog walking podcast is the who you are. What you do would be sharing a weekly podcast to help you in your dog walking business. And then that's also the what's in it for them, helping them with their
Right.
dog walking business. You could add something like bringing in experts monthly for fresh perspectives. Like you could add something else that puts in like the value add to them. And then you're probably going to want to do a call to action in there that's like, listen to episodes now and put like the little down arrow
Right.
emoji that points to your link in bio. So it's super simple and ideally in bullet point format. Bullet points perform better in bios because
Mm,
it's scannable. People aren't
yeah.
going to read a paragraph. So if you can
Correct.
put the exact same information in a paragraph and bullet points convert more. So again, let's use the example of the dog walking podcast. Use different dog face emojis as your bullet
Yeah.
points for each line, right? So you make it quirky, fun, relatable. People tell me all the time, again, I work with a lot of real estate agents and they're like, Jen, I don't do emojis. I don't do cute. I am professional.
Oh,
And I'm like,
Lord.
great. Then find an emoji that is not cute. There are diamonds and circles and
Yeah.
stars
Houses,
and
keys.
there's tons of things, right? Like there's so many emojis out there that you can use that are on brand,
Yeah.
on color, and that will work. You don't have to use a sunshine or a dog face emoji or the dancing woman emoji. Like you can use the little podcast microphone
Yeah.
emoji. You can use, the audio, like the megaphone emoji. There's so many things that you could do to tie in and make people feel welcome, but
Yeah.
also again, who you are, what you do, and what's in it for them is your three key factors. If you do that, you're going to have way more conversions on your
Mm,
profile.
I love that. I'm changing my profile tomorrow.
I will say, like as a professional tip, do not write your own profile.
Ooh.
It's really, we are horrible. I don't care if you're a marketer, we are the worst at marketing ourselves.
Yeah.
So I actually, tell people all the time, I'm like, make this your little homework assignment and reach out to colleagues. If you have like a VA or somebody that works on your team, reach out to them, reach out to some of your customers or your loyal listeners that you have good relationships with and say, if you could describe my podcast in one sentence, what would it be? If you
Ooh.
could describe me as a host in one sentence, what would it be? If you could describe the podcast in 3 words, what would it be? Get 5 or 6 people to give you that feedback. Most of the time, it's not going to shock you with how they come back, but the terminology they use may
Right.
not be what you would have thought of. And if
Mm.
you're asking your target audience to define what you do, they're using the words that the rest of your target audience relates to. So
Ooh.
we're over here being like, exceptional podcast for photographers. And someone's over here like, you teach back to basics for photographers and it's amazing. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
well, I wouldn't have thought to phrase it that way, right? Like we want to phrase it the way that relates to more of our target audience. And what other people will describe as our business is often a much better way. And like you said, you love my bio. I cannot take credit for it. It's technically mine. Yes, I've written it. Evolved off of a podcast host. She wrote my bio for the podcast, and I was like, "This is epic. I'm copying it. Can I use it?"
Nice.
She's like, "Of course. I just took your information." Like, no. You made this way better. And so I use hers, and I've evolved it over the years
Mhm.
and whatnot. But it was definitely something that I wouldn't have ever written it that way about myself. And so these are things that evolved from what other people talk about and say about my brand is what you'll actually read in my bio.
Yeah. Ooh, that's such a good tip. I know we've run out of time. I could probably ask you way more questions, but we have covered a lot, right?
Yes, we did.
I know, covered so many good things. I so appreciate having you on the show. Letting me pick your brain, find
Of
out what's
course.
working and what's not working. I've already learned some things that I need to apply myself.
That's why we have guests, though, right? Because it
I
helps us learn.
know. Absolutely. Now, I will put obviously a lot of resources on the show notes. I know you've got Profit Your Profile and membership. You've got an audit that you do for people. You have so many good resources on your website. But so what would you like to share with the listeners today?
Well, we talked about hashtags, so I would
Mhm.
highly recommend if this is something you're like, okay, Jen, that sounds interesting, but what am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to find these hashtags? I could literally talk about hashtags for an hour. So
Oh, wow.
we barely scratched the surface in like the 3 minutes we talked about it. But you can go to my link in bio, or you can just go to my website, Jen's Trends, and go to the books tab. I have an ebook called Hashtags Unlocked. It's $9, but it's 20 pages. It's immediate download for you. It's an ebook and it will walk you through literally everything you need to know about hashtags, why they're valuable, breaking down common myths, and it helps you literally strategize how to pick out the right hashtags for you. It
Yeah.
includes a worksheet so you can literally write them all down as you're going and figuring out what works for you. And it even has a section in there at the end for what if Instagram changes the hashtag rules? What if we can only use 5? What if we can't use hashtags? How can you prepare now for that
Mm.
forthcoming strategy? So it really is an all-encompassing book. It is single-handedly the most comprehensive resource out there for Instagram hashtags. So again, you can get that pretty much anywhere from jenstrends.com. Go to books, and then you can get that hashtags unlocked ebook. It's an amazing resource. Literally, I get emails weekly from people being like, Jen, I implemented your hashtag strategy. I got 3 new clients. I'm like,
Sweet.
I know. And I'm like, it's like the one proven strategy that I would
Yeah.
put money on every day. So by all
Love it.
means, go check that out. Then of course, check out everything else on my website or my
Yeah,
Instagram account. And I share tons of
you
resources,
do.
tips, helpful information on my Instagram account. So go follow me there at Jens_trends.
Yeah. And even following you and just seeing how you format and how you do your reels, I've already gotten a couple of ideas. I'm like,
Yay.
oh, that looks doable. I can do that.
And
Yeah.
that's the
So
thing,
well done.
don't overcomplicate it, right? I mean, that you can see all again the influencers and they spend
I
hours and they
know.
spend days, they spend money making these reels and these transitions. I'm like, girl, I'm a one take. I'm like, I get on
Yeah.
camera, I say what I'm going to say, and I'm like, I make up words, I flub words, I keep going, I hit end, and I hit upload. Like, I am not here to waste my time creating content. You
Seriously.
get the real me.
Yeah. No, I would much rather get a real person, and you are totally real and open and honest and personable. Yeah, I love what you do.
Thank you.
So thank you again for being on the show. I will keep following you on Instagram, checking out all your hot tips. Yeah, so thanks for being on the show.
Of course, thank you. And good luck to everybody out there. You can absolutely be successful on Instagram, and I hope this helps.
Awesome. Fabulous. Well, that is another episode for this week, and I'll see you next week on the Leverage Your Podcast show. Take care.